You're listening to Life by Design for Chiropractors, episode 18.
Welcome to Life by Design, the podcast for chiropractors. Here's your host, Dr. Jamie Richards.
Welcome to Life by Design for Chiropractors, the voice of reason in chiropractic. I'm Dr. Jamie Richards. I'm your host. On today's episode, we start a three-part series on the most fatal marketing mistakes chiropractors make. Today, we jumped into the first one, not the top mistake, number 3, and we're going to count them down week by week by week over the next 3 weeks, the number 3 mistake. So I think you're going to get a lot out of this 3-part series. We're going to talk about those 3 fatal mistakes that really plague chiropractors, that keep them from generating pre-qualified new people into their practice and kind of keep them on that wheel around and around looking for the next new person. And we're going to do everything we can to help you solve that. So enjoy today's episode of Life by Design for Chiropractors. Michael Gibson, welcome back to Life by Design for Chiropractors. How are you today?
Thank you. Great to be here. And super excited for this one because we obviously spent most of last week talking about exactly what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, we were at the Life by Design corporate meetings. We used to have the corporate getaway, and it was always at a cottage or a place with water, which was nice. But the truth be told, we probably got more work done because there wasn't a whole lot else to do other than just focus in on LifeCon, which was nice.
That and the Portugal and Croatia soccer Euro 2016 match, that Croatia absolutely could not miss.
Yes, well, I'm sure if you reverse the roles, Mike, and it was, Canada, U.S. Olympic hockey, I'm pretty sure we'd be watching the same game.
So true, absolutely true. Actually, it was kind of interesting. I don't watch too much soccer, so it was it was kind of neat to see, and I was very intrigued to see Croatia and how into the game he got. So I was sorry to see his team lose. He was quite upset.
Well, that's tough. That's what happens in soccer when you don't get a shot on net. It's tough to score. But when you judge the success or the excitement of a game by the number of passes, then that tells a tale. But again, we're not soccer fans. Croatia is, so we're just giving them a hard time. But we did talk about LifeCon. That's what we spent the weekend on. And what we're going to jump into over the next 3 Life by Design for Chiropractors podcasts is we're going to talk about the 3 biggest marketing mistakes. We thought that would be a lot of fun. They cover kind of dig into some of the concepts that we know we're going to discuss at LifeCon, obviously not with the same depth. If you do want more information about that, and marketing is, it's on the top of your list of things that you should really be working on or dealing with, you can actually go to bestlifeconever.com and check out some of the details of LifeCon and see if it's a good match for you. But over the next few podcasts, we're going to talk about these 3. And of course, I'm not going to tell you what all 3 of them are. And we're going to talk about what number 3 is, and we'll do a countdown, like the old America's Top 40 with Casey Kasem. And that makes me feel really old because I'm not talking about Ryan Seacrest. I'm talking about Casey Kasem for those people who remember him. But Mike, talk just a bit about, just in general, marketing. When we decided to make LifeCon topic this year, marketing, it was really born out of the idea that chiropractors in general are just really terrible marketers.
I think... Yes, that's true. I absolutely agree.
Don't sugarcoat it, Mike.
I don't want to make people all upset at me here, but yeah, it's true. I think chiropractors are horrible, horrible marketers, and I can say that because I was a horrible, horrible marketer for the first 6 or 7 years of practice. And so, I've been there. I know what I've done. I know what I was thinking when I decided to, which marketing projects to take on. And I think it's getting worse for some reason. I don't know if it's the technology gap, if it's that because so much marketing these days is done online, if it's that, because there's a whole, it's not just learning marketing, but actually learning, marketing online and learning the technology that goes along with it. I don't know if that gap has been widening, but I really feel that chiropractic marketing has always been very poor, and it's been getting worse and worse and worse. And I certainly can relate because, like I said, I was a terrible marketer for the very majority of my practice career. So Yeah, I think, it comes down to a bunch of things. The biggest things that I see that chiropractors are doing wrong, and of course we're going to go over the three biggest, very specific mistakes, but, speaking more generally, I think chiropractic marketing tends to be a lot of follow the leader. So you notice that someone maybe you, Jamie, maybe you've got some big marketing project that you're talking about, and then you'll see, 25 other chiropractors, following, doing the exact same thing, using the exact same copy, even though they're in completely different markets, have completely different practices. But it worked for Jamie, so it's going to work for me. Kind of attitude, very kind of. This is a new term for me. That kind of spray and pray type marketing, where it's kind of these one-offs that, again, maybe they caught on from some marketing group. With very little integration, or bigger plan. But it's kind of this haphazard little, let's try this and let's try that and let's try this. And there seems to also be on top of that this, and we talked a lot of this on the weekend, which was really fun, and again, I'm saying this from a place where I've been there and I've thought these things, but this idea that, the marketing rules, like what's successful as far as marketing goes, it's different in chiropractic than every other business that exists. There's that notion, or at least that's what our actions in chiropractic seem to show based on what I see other chiropractors doing. It's just that we think we kind of play by different rules within chiropractic, and we don't seem to follow what works in every other successful industry and business on the planet. So, those are just some of the big things. And of course, we're going to hit on the three biggest things and be really specific about it today and over the next couple weeks. But, chiropractors are very poor marketers. I think that if we really look at the public's perception of what we do, there's lots of variables there, of course, but I think that says a lot about the success of our marketing. Of course, the utilization rate is pathetically low. I think that says a lot about our marketing abilities. So, I think it's something that, of course, we chose it as the topic for LifeCon this year because it's a topic that when you and I are consulting and working with different docs, it's always one of the most glaring gaps that exist is around marketing and the inability to bring in new pre-qualified new people on a very consistent basis. So that's of course why we chose it for LifeCon. But I think it's probably in the top three. Based on my experience, I know from speaking with you, it's the same. These are, marketing is probably one of the top three struggles that chiropractors are having today.
Yeah, I think it's a huge struggle. It's a huge struggle that I've had for a long time. And, I've learned a lot for sure over the past couple of years in terms of marketing and really committed myself to becoming a better marketer. I know as you've done the same, and now we've created the new wing at Life by Design for Chiropractors that does some of these projects and bigger, systematic integration for people with their marketing programs. But it's such an animal, and I don't think I ever realized just how big it was. And, when I thought of marketing, I thought the same thing. It's like, oh, well, let's get a t-shirt for everybody, or let's do a talk over at the school, and then don't do anything after the talk. And it's just, one thing after the other. Let's run an ad in the paper. Let's do a new newsletter. And while all of those are components of marketing, you're kind of missing the big picture. And that's really what mistake number 3 actually is in the top 3 mistakes. The top 3, Mike, are so close together. Any one of these could be number 1. And I know jokingly, we actually went back and forth on what number 1 was. We kind of moved these around trying to figure out what order we wanted to go in. But, today we're going to talk about follow-up. And, the number 3 mistake that marketers make, and back to your point there, that chiropractors are not separate and distinct from other businesses. We talk about running a successful business has the 4 different requirements from team and systems, communication, leadership, and, marketing follows and kind of pops into each one of those. But what counts as good marketing is the same across all businesses. Now, it doesn't mean that all the different systematic integration is going to be the same or the same, tactics, but the principles are going to be the same. So this is the same for any business. If we happen to have other people, non-chiropractors who listen to the show, it's follow-up. It's what happens after your, marketing tactic occurs that's important. So, Mike, I know you talk a lot about the 90-10 principle in terms of marketing. People have heard the 80-20 in other areas, but, what's this 90-10 principle and how does it apply specifically to follow-up?
Sure. And, to be clear, I mean, the numbers like 90-10, that could easily be 80-20 or even 70-30, depending on the project. That would be the biggest indicator, is that if you're doing, say, a screening versus a talk, versus some other marketing event that you're putting on, the numbers are going to change. So please don't get, hung up on it. That there's, it's not like the 80-20 rule where there's some, mathematical reason for it being that way. I just chose 90-10 because that's, I think on average, that's probably about where it falls. And what the 90-10 is actually referring to, and this is something, again, one of those principles that every entrepreneur, must know when it comes to marketing specifically, is that your leads, the people that are, potential clients or practice members in this case, or patients, they are going to fall on a continuum, a temperature continuum. That's how it's often called and named. And so this continuum, and they call it a temperature continuum because essentially it's, someone going from cold to warm to hot and, everywhere in between. And what they're describing is how ready someone is to book a consult in our case. How ready is someone to buy? And so, of course, someone who's never heard of you is going to be, fall into that cold category. They may also be someone who doesn't even know that they need your help. That they don't even know maybe even what chiropractic is. I mean, and of course, there's differing variances of this, and it is a continuum. But then someone who's warm might be someone who's got a specific problem. They may have even heard that chiropractic is something that they should check out. They should look into. They may have even heard about you from someone else. So they're starting to get a little bit warmer to this idea. They're starting to check you out. They're starting to look for you on Google or look for you on Facebook or other social media outlets. And then, of course, hot is someone who's ready to buy. They just want essentially, any touch, and they're just like, okay, tell me what do I need to do? I want to come and see you. I've been, I've gone through this process, and now I'm here and I'm ready to go. And so, the 90-10, to come back to that, essentially, the idea here is that, let's just take a talk as an example. And we've talked about doing talks and public speaking on several episodes already, is that, generally speaking, there may be about 10% of the room who's just, after you've done talking, that's been enough to bridge that, temperature continuum for them, and they're ready, they're hot, they're ready to take action. So when you, offer a appropriate, and we've definitely talked about that on previous episodes, an appropriate offer, they're just running to the back of the room saying, like, please, I want to see you tomorrow. When can I come in? And so it's that 10% of people that are eager, are ready to buy. And I find, and it's been my observation, that for the most part, almost all chiropractic projects, if I can call them that chiropractors use as the core parts of their marketing plan and their blueprint, are all geared at just hitting the hot people. Just, how do I get the hot people? I'm going to do this little project, and at the screening, I'm going to get the 10% who are the hot people that I happen to be at that screening, and the other 90%, well, they're not ready, and I have no way of actually, potentially capturing any of those, and then, working my way up to, warmer and warmer temperatures until they are hot and they are ready to come in for a consult. So my observation, to summarize this essentially, is that usually there's about 10% of people at any particular marketing project that are just ready to take action, and of course you want to give them the opportunity to take action. And it's the other 90% that we leave on the table and that we don't address in any way, and we don't follow up with. Of course, that's the big mistake we're talking about today, is that chiropractors do not follow up with potential leads, is that we leave 90% of the leads on the table. And I'm not saying that 90% are going to come in at one point. But what I'm saying is that we need to, and this is why follow-up is so important, we need to figure out a way to tap into that 90%. Right? It's a big number. It's a lot of people. If you look over, the years and years of marketing events you've done, if you've left 90% of every person that you've ever spoken to, you've never even followed up to see if they might even be interested or attempted to move them through the temperature continuum, well, that's just a huge missed opportunity.
I'm not sure if people right now, Mike, are feeling as bad about themselves as I am as you continue to talk about this. But, I'm thinking of all these talks. I mean, literally, that's what's going through my mind is all the different, because I did a lot of speaking in my first practice, and it really was, what helped me build my first practice. And, I look back and there was lots of success there. But now I'm just thinking of all the opportunity that I missed and all the different, workshops that I delivered a great, presentation. I could have captured their email or some type of way to connect with them, and I just didn't. And, thinking to myself about the people who didn't come in and who could have been in my funnel and so on. So, I know lots of people who are listening in, they're having the same thought. You did this talk, there was 50 people, and, you're pretty stoked that 5 people came in, scheduled a consultation, but this still leaves 45 other people who, if you delivered enough value, they very well would have said yes to something, whether it was a lead magnet or some type of exchange for their email address. And, maybe it would have been a year or two process. You could have brought them along the temperature continuum, and maybe they would have had, 5 or 6 or 10 more people eventually come in. And you can start to imagine the power of this as you start to layer these on top of one another. In the beginning stage of implementing a big marketing blueprint like this, it's going to seem like it's not working. And I speak from experience here, and Mike and I had this conversation in the pre-show, but once you have 1, then 2, then 3, then 20 different funnels that are happening, and then, different talks, and you're at talk number 30 or 40 over the course of a couple of years, that's when you have all of these leads in your funnel moving along the continuum. And it takes that amount of time, Mike. You've had an experience now. You work with a lot of doctors. We're, creating conversion-based websites. You're building marketing blueprints. You're implementing funnels. So you're really seeing it now. Do you have a time frame, general time frame in mind? Because I think a lot of people listening in, I bet you they're like me and they're thinking, oh, I just have this funnel, did a talk, and I can't believe nobody came in. I did the follow-up. It didn't work.
Yeah, and I mean, there's lots of variables here, and of course, the first thing that pops in my mind is, of course, the quality of your follow-up. There's follow-up. There's obviously different, varying, success rates of follow-up, and there's different ways of doing it. And of course, if you're going to use email, and that's the other thing here that we shouldn't overlook is that doing follow-up assumes that you have the ability to follow up. So that means, generally either phone or email. So email, I think, is the most logical choice. Because, as we talk about, you mentioned automation, which of course is, taking us out of the equation so that when we get we're at a talk, and maybe, as you mentioned, as one example, you offer a lead magnet for someone to maybe it's, maybe you did a talk about food or whatever it might be, about nutrition. Maybe you offer them, if you want to leave me your name and email, I will send you a recipe pack, or I will send you a copy of all my slides and all my notes from this presentation. I mean, you can do all sorts of different things, be creative based, depending on what you're doing, and you can replicate that for any event that you're doing. Just be creative, but you need to capture their email. And what I found is that 99% of people are very willing to give you their email if you find the right thing that they're very interested in, and that is really going to help them and that they want. So that's never been a problem. People are like, well, they're not going to give me their email. They will give you their email if you give them something valuable enough. So you have to do your homework about that one. But I think email, again, is a logical choice. I personally would never give my phone number out, and I think people guard that a lot more closely. So, and I think just as a doctor, as a professional, there's appropriate follow-up and inappropriate follow-up. Cold calling as a doctor in my area, in my market anyway, that's not okay. It's not socially acceptable for a doctor. They'd be like, why is this doctors have waiting lists here. Why don't you have a waiting list, and why are you calling me, begging me to come in? So appropriate follow-up is really important. So, coming back to that, of course, is, how successful are the emails you write? How good is the copy that you're writing? How often are you doing it? How regularly? There's lots of different variables there, but I will say this, and this is coming from, probably one of the top 5-10 marketers on the planet, Dean Jackson, from I Love Marketing, great podcast that I'd encourage everyone to be listening to. He was actually, believe it or not, I'm not sure if you knew this, Jamie, he was the inventor of the opt-in page, of the landing page, which is, revolutionary in marketing. But he said once that for him, when he gets a new lead on his list, so for us, what I'm saying is that if you get one of those 90%, if you get their email and they're on your list now, he says that in his world, in his different industries, because he's in a lot of different industries, especially in real estate, but he doesn't see the value of that for 1 to 2 years. And again, even just 1 to 2, that whole extra year, there's a big difference there. So there's a lot of variables involved. But the bottom line here and the message, and I think to answer your question, hopefully, is that it takes time to move people through this continuum. But I promise you, if you're sending them regular stuff, if you've built the relationship, if you've been giving, the principle of reciprocity is going to come into play. If you do it right, over time, you are going to see a significant percentage of those people come in. But you're absolutely right. I think this is the point you're trying to make, is it's a process and it's going to take some time and maybe even, some significant time. But this is a blueprint, a plan, a long-term plan. I think we all intend to be in business for a very long time. And we need a plan that's going to span the life expectancy of our business. So we need to start thinking that way versus, okay, I'm going to do a screening and I'm hoping to get 5 new people from it. We've got to change our mindset. We've got to think long-term. We've got to think, long-term growth. And we definitely have to come up with these automated ways to really tap into that 90%.
And I think the long game here, and I'll come back to the opposite side of this and play devil's advocate here, Mike, in a second. But, the long game here really does pay. And I want to just highlight, pays actual money, actual dollars in your pocket. And at the end of the day, you're running a business. And yes, it's great that we run a business that helps a lot of people, that allows people to live a better life, a longer life, a life with more quality. It does all those things we know chiropractic can do for people, which is wonderful. And that's just a side product and side benefit of this. But, perfect example, someone came into my practice about 6 months ago. They had been on my list for 4 years. And to be honest, I wasn't even really doing good marketing. I had a list. I'll at least say that. And, I had a CRM. If you don't know what a CRM is, it's a place where you actually put the people who you're capturing and the leads that you're capturing. And, Mike, I think, we like ConvertKit as one of the options that people can use. It's a good one. So I'll throw the link in the show notes for people who are listening in. But, this person, I got my emails for 4 years, and it was probably very, sporadic, where sometimes it was every week, sometimes it was, once a month. Nonetheless, she came in, and at this point, at 6 months, just to give you exact numbers, she's already invested, I think around $3,000 into chiropractic care. She's into her second program, just joined the gym. So she just, invested another $2,000. So, 4 years it took, but this person's invested $5,000 in my practice. How many of those people do you need to have over and over again before this becomes the most logical way to develop and grow a successful practice, both in impact and also, financially?
There's 2 things that I want to first give a quick example that I think will hopefully hit this point home even further. And also, before I share the example, I also want to mention as well is that when you have someone like that, Jamie, who you've kind of nurtured along, I think you said for 4 years, all of that information that you've sent them along the way, all of that follow-up, all the emails, the newsletters, all those things have built the relationship there. And I guarantee that that person has a very clear picture of what it is that you do, what you stand for, what to expect when they get to your office. And not only are you getting more new people, we've talked a lot about this, is that we're getting new, pre-qualified people who have already bought you. So by the time they come in, it's not like you're, when they come in, you're not having to sell them, on your recommendations. You've been telling them about it for 4 years. They've already bought. When they make that call, they're in. I think we all want more of those people. Those are the people that we love to see walk through our door for the first time. So I think that's a very important point there that shouldn't be overlooked. And just to give you an example, and it's a little bit, it's in a different market. Of course, I have a gym as well. And this was something that happened in January that really opened my eyes. And the gym has been open for just over 3 years. And 3 years ago, I ran when we first opened, actually before we opened, I ran a campaign where it was, get on the list now for I think it was some type of discount on like introductory memberships. I forget exactly what it was, but I got maybe 300 or 400 emails on this list way back when. So this is again 3.5 years ago, and so these people have been sitting on that list, and we email regularly, we follow up regularly with these people, not as regularly as I think we should, but nonetheless, in this past January, I sent out an offer. So I sent out, I asked them, I gave them an offer to come into the office. And this is not the office, but to the gym. And this isn't the first time I've done it. But we had 20 people take us up on that offer, and 11 of them were from that initial group 3.5 years ago that for whatever reason, I know why. It's because I've been following up with them regularly. But 11 people from that list decided that this past January was the time. And so for us, an average membership, an annual membership, so even if they just were a member for 1 year, that's $2,000. So, just from the gym, which is, we don't have nearly the margins that we do in chiropractic. I mean, that's, a 22,000 1 year, increase in profit that I wouldn't have had otherwise, simply because I knew enough to capture their emails 3.5 years ago. I happened to hit on a really good offer this past January. It all clicked, and the gym was $22,000 richer, and that's in, again, a market where the margins are very, very slim.
Yeah, we keep telling these stories over and over. I think that it's a powerful, an important point to make, because I know the opposite to this is, and what you hear a lot, to be on the other side of this is, we're chiropractors, we need to save lives, we need people in our offices now, people can't wait, so we have to do whatever is possible. We have to push them, even if we have to push them to get them in, because we're saving them and we're saving their lives. Yeah, I mean, this sounds so familiar, doesn't it, Mike? In terms of what gets taught out there. And that's how it gets passed off as okay to do, because that person's life got saved. Who cares about the other people? They're the ones who are going to lose out. But that's not necessarily true. You are losing out. And not only are you losing out on all these 90%, long term, and we're talking in tens of thousands of dollars, but I'm talking about in terms of damaging your reputation, damaging the opportunity to sell to these people down the road. People love to tell other people about a really bad experience, more so than a good experience. So, I mean, there's a huge negative effect of taking that approach and really putting all your emphasis on the people who are in the room, for example, or, heavily discounting your examinations to get them through the door to try and sell them on care. I get it. This is what is passed off as chiropractic marketing for so long that it's just become accepted. But I'm telling you, it's an absolutely terrible idea. It's just, it seems good on the surface because you have a few more new people in your practice, and that means a few more dollars. But I'm telling you, long term, it is a very, very poor business principle to implement as part of your strategy.
Jamie, I think it might be valuable even, I was just thinking here, we keep talking about follow-up, but maybe just to, as I always think there's three main, there's probably lots of subcategories, but there's three main types of follow-up that are important. So I think just talking about those just for a minute will really help all those who are listening. So, the first thing, the first type of follow-up, the first category is what I would call like a value follow-up. So this would be, a regular blog post, a newsletter, an ebook that you wrote, anything like that you can send in a digital fashion that can give people a gift, give them something that they would really enjoy. And of course, this is where understanding your avatar is so important, really doing your research, knowing what they would actually like, not just sending them stuff because you thought it was interesting, but sending them stuff that they will genuinely, truly, appreciate and learn from. And so that's the first type of follow-up, is having value follow-up that you want to constantly be giving, month after month after month after month. The second category is what I call kind of relationship follow-up, where it's more maybe sharing some of your experiences. It's maybe sharing a little bit of insight into your personal life. Even, of course, we all have different barriers and lines we don't want to cross with that, but some way to start to build this relationship online. It's of course a little bit more challenging versus say, what, it's the same thing as when someone comes in and the first thing you try and do is try and connect with them. You try and find that common ground. It's no different. But I think it's an important part of follow-up to try and create that relationship from the beginning so they feel like a friend, less likely to opt out that way, but also it builds that relationship, and I think it moves them through that temperature continuum much, much faster. And the last one is what I would call, and this is the one that I missed for a long time, and I don't think we do enough of, is the ask. And I'm a big fan, Gary Vaynerchuk, who's a social media guru. He has this book, which is a great book called Jab, 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 Right Hook. And the jab, jab, jab refers to value, 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 giving, giving, giving. And then there's got to be a hook at the end where you actually, go ask for a sale. And I think that's something that I know has been kind of the weak point in my marketing follow-ups, my email follow-ups in the past, is that I didn't do enough asking. So I was giving, and I didn't do enough asking to say, hey, just so you know, this is, go over to our website, which is my sales page, and you just go over there, read more about what we do, or whatever is appropriate based on the follow-up funnel. But, I didn't do enough of that asking. So for me, those are that's how I kind of categorize the different follow-ups that I create. But I think most types of follow-ups would fall into one of those three categories. But it's important that you have a strategy, that you, again, are checking the boxes off, and you're sending out emails that are, fit into each of those three different types of follow-up.
So, I know for people listening, their brain is probably spinning right now trying to figure out how this actually looks and what the infrastructure of this is. So, with the few minutes we have left, Mike, let's just talk a bit about, one of the ways this could unfold. There's other ways it could be, follow-up for people who are inactive. It could be a referral follow-up. So somebody says, hey, my friend, Mike is struggling with XYZ. I really think you can help him. Do you have a follow-up system in place for that? So those are some other ones, but the main one that we're talking about, and the one that I think really can be the biggest reward for you, is, email marketing. So, a campaign and having something in place. And this is what we're talking about before with automation. So, example would be, let's say we go and do a public lecture, and, we offer them a recipe pack. I happen to talk, so it talks a little bit about food, and they get a recipe pack. What happens after that? Do they just get my recipe pack and then they just get, on my list, and all of a sudden they're getting emails? Or is there a series of, components that are put in place that automatically happen every time I go do a talk? I upload those people to the list, and every time there's a tried and true tested series of emails that lead them through, where those people who are either hot, who didn't make an appointment when I was standing up at the front, they can still follow through, and they're asked, as Mike said earlier, in the different types of follow-up, we actually ask them, go to the website. If we can help you, book a consultation. Then they can get into the leads list. Then they can get your ongoing emails. But there needs to be something put in place that's automated and that's built. And I know, Mike, one of the key concepts of that, just to give people the next layer, is it needs to actually sound like it's you speaking to them.
Yeah, I think, Jamie, you laid out a lot of it right there, and you laid it out perfectly. Yeah, absolutely. Again, it's not just copying someone else's emails. There's templates and principles that we need to follow, of course. But yeah, absolutely. You have to know your avatar. Jamie, you and I have spoken a lot about this, how my market and your market are very, very different. I'm in a big town, you're in a very small town. And so we're talking to very different people, and we've, some things that have worked great for me have not worked well for you, and vice versa. So understanding who your market is, who your avatar is, always first, and making sure that you're not just, that your marketing is coming from you and your voice, especially when we're talking about copy. And when I say copy, I mean, what we're actually writing in these emails. So those are very critical things to consider. The other big, I think, principle here, Jamie, that I think it's kind of my filter, if you will, whenever I'm putting these strategies together, is that I'm trying to think, if you and I, Jamie, if you and I met on the street and, we didn't know each other, and you told me that you were having problems sleeping, I think if I said, oh, you should come into my office, that was the next thing out of my voice, my mouth, what would you say? You'd be like, what? Because the reality is, people think of chiropractors as, someone who cracks your back and makes back and neck pain go away. So, I always, consider the fact that I want to act like you and I were having this real conversation and you said to me, just for example, just to continue on that example of sleep, if you said, I am having trouble sleeping, how would that conversation go in real life? That's how I figure out all the different emails that I need to write. There's a gap there between I can't sleep and you should come into the office, and what do I need to say? How would that conversation go in real life? Two human beings talking to each other. How would that go? And that's what I write out, essentially. It's kind of putting the logical pieces together in the progression of how I think that conversation would go. Every kind of email building on the one before. And just thinking about it that way. So if it's depending on what the gift was in the beginning that you gave to get the email, that's really going to dictate how many emails and what those emails are going to say. But just a few little tidbits to add about building a successful funnel is that the first thing, of course, you want to do is deliver what you promised. That's very important. We talked about that with the referability rules a couple of weeks ago, where we were talking about following through and doing what you say you're going to do. So first, deliver it. Second, I always like to send out an email that is encouraging them to read it, giving them some highlights. I want them to read it because it's not just good enough that I send it to them. I want them to actually read it and understand it and find value in it, because that's going to move them further along that continuum, build me as an authority, get them, help them get to know me better. So that's, of course, something that's very valuable to me. And then the next series of emails, it's going to be, this is where you talked about having kind of that consistent campaign of emails. I usually have a series that includes some social proof, so some testimonials built into some emails. I have some that are going to build authority, usually through a third party. So I'll oftentimes add an article from somebody else that's backing up what I'm saying, or a video that I found on YouTube that's backing up something that I'm going to say, so they don't think I'm the only crazy one that thinks like this. Those are the main ones: building authority, getting some social proof, letting them know that others are actually have gone through my process and have found it very valuable and had great success with it. Those are the main pieces. There's some other pieces to it. And then, of course, the last one, asking them, hey, listen, you should really go to my website because I've laid out exactly what I do there. And I think, if you really want a solution to your health challenges, then, this is what you need, and go there. And of course, as we've chatted about, my website is set up so that it's really, it's a sales page to get them to, click the button to come into the office and sit down and chat with me. So, these are different in every case. You need to know who you are, know who they are. You need to understand some basic principles, but they are going to be a little bit different. But hopefully I answered your question, Jamie, and that gave those listening an idea of the types of things, the types of hot buttons you need to hit throughout that process.
So guys, we covered a lot on today's episode of Life by Design for Chiropractors. I really want to get across that, don't get disillusioned by how complex this seems and how challenging this is. The reality is, and the truth is, it is complex. It is difficult. I don't want to pretend like it's not. We're going to do everything we can to help you through the process and to guide you and to point you in the right direction. But on the flip side, just because you can't do something or don't have the skills currently to do it doesn't mean it's not a requirement for a successful business. And I think that is one of the things that happens to chiropractors, Mike, is we just stay stuck in the same model because, what is changing and what is new and, what is, the core of how a successful business runs. Sometimes those things are difficult. And, whether it's the profession is lazy, I don't know exactly what the psychological profile is, but it's almost as if we just want the quick fix. We want it to be simple. We don't want to spend a lot of money on it. But at the same time, we want to make a lot of money. We want to have a lot of people. So we want all the results. We sound like our practice members, right? We want all the results. We want to feel better, be healthier, lose weight, but not do anything or pay any money for it. And it just cannot happen that way. So don't get disillusioned. Don't get freaked out. We're going to guide you through the process. It's all going to be right here. And make sure next week you join us because we're going to talk about number 2 and what the number 2 biggest marketing mistake chiropractors make. And obviously we'll give you some solutions to that. So go to the show notes page, lifebydesign4chiropractors.com/podcast, and you can see everything from today's episode and any links that we put in there and downloads that are available for you. And thank you so much for listening to Life by Design for Chiropractors, the voice of reason in chiropractic.